Welcome to Science for Hire with your host, Dr. Charles Handler. Science for Hire provides 30 minutes of enlightenment on best practices and news from the front lines of the employment testing universe.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Science for Hire. I am your host, Dr. Charles Handler, and I have another in a series of amazing guests going back 60-some episodes. Amazing guest, Christina Norris Watts of Johnson & Johnson. She is the head of assessment and people practice, which is a pretty cool title. And I love to let my guests introduce themselves because who knows them better than them? So have at it, Christina.
Thanks so much, Charles. I am so excited and thrilled to be here. I think you run a fabulous podcast, and you've had some of my favorite people on your podcast in the past. So it's really just a thrill to be here. So I'm Christina Norris Watts. Like you said, I lead our assessment and people practices team within global talent management at Johnson & Johnson. I've been at Johnson & Johnson for 7 years now. Before that, I was in financial services, did a brief stint at a hedge fund, and before that, an investment bank, and started my career at APT Metrics as a consultant.
Me too.
Yes. Mainly doing litigation support for companies who had been sued for discrimination in hiring, pay, or performance. And it was really that work that made me want to go internal into a company. I thought maybe I could affect more long-lasting change internal. And it's really my dream job at J&J. I love it. I get to oversee all of our selection assessment strategy, our development assessment strategy, our skills strategy, and also succession planning falls into my world. So anything that has to do with what we measure people on and then how we measure them on those things, either before we hire them or after, falls into my world. It's awesome.
Very cool. So I'm glad that we're able to make this happen too. We tried, I don't know, multiple times. We had some technical issues. So you don't live near like a nuclear power plant or any power lines, or you have a steel plate in your head or anything like that, right?
I mean, no steel plate. It is New Jersey, so I don't think I live near a power plant, but I guess I can't be totally certain.
Oh, just kidding. So I can't wait to dig into what you do. I mean, I also worked at APT, by the way, early in my career. I'm doing the same thing. Were you in the Connecticut office?
Yeah, in Darien.
Oh, yeah, me too. I was there, let's see, 99 to 2000, something like that. So good 23 years ago. But what a great education. I really learned to be a consultant there. They're just so good at being polished, good consultants. So I learned my chops there. It was great. I value that time a lot. So Johnson & Johnson, let's talk about that a little bit. What's your favorite Johnson & Johnson product?
Oh, well, that's
you got to have a favorite. There's so many.
That's a tricky one now that we've spun off our consumer business, right? So we recently spun off our consumer business, and that is now our Kenview, a totally separate entity. So, but I mean, it was Band-Aid was the answer. It was the Band-Aid. And the reason was because that was the easiest thing to explain to my children when they asked me what I did, right? I helped hire the people that made the Band-Aids, right? And I helped make sure they were good at their jobs. And so now I help make sure people are good at their jobs who are creating, robots for surgery and creating cancer drugs, which is very cool if you're a grown-up. And robots are cool if you're a kid, but robots for surgery isn't that leads to a lot more questions.
Yeah, and COVID vaccine, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, didn't you guys come up with one of those? That's pretty good. Helped a lot of people. So it's really crazy. I'm not making this up. I went through a list of the consumer products right before the call to make sure I saw the domain of them to pick my favorite, and I also chose Band-Aid. and I chose Band-Aid A because the commercial jingle, I am stuck on Band-Aid because Band-Aid stuck on me. That, I remember that because I watched a lot of TV and also just remember all the great memories of being cut and bruised and sliced and my mom putting a Band-Aid on me, and every kid puts Band-Aids on when they don't even have a wound. At least I did, and my kid does.
Oh, yeah.
So there's something about those Band-Aids.
We put Band-Aids on tummies for hurt feelings.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, there
if
you
your
go.
feelings are hurt. And Band-Aids were on the very first shuttle, I believe, that went up into space.
Oh, wow.
That was makes sense. Of course, if you're an astronaut and you're going into space, you might need a Band-Aid, but we're pretty proud of that.
Yeah, you have a spacesuit on, but if you got a cut, that would be disgusting, because in zero gravity, you'd have blood just floating everywhere in the air. That's crazy. So you would need a Band-Aid. I hope, and it seems like they wouldn't have to use those to fix anything in the actual spacecraft. Because
Apollo 13 style.
Yeah, exactly. Just stick a gauze pad or the little round ones on there. Well, cool. So we're calibrated as to where we've worked and what our favorite product is. That's a lot of fun. And there's so much to talk about today, but I have a lot, it's very special when you have someone who is, a good IO psychologist who has the opportunity to run large scale testing programs that are broad within the organization and shows the organization really cares about it, because it is a differentiator. I can promise everybody that when you do it at that level and that scope, and you're not just, hey, we got a problem in our call center, come on in, because that's typical. And I, as a consultant, typically end up in those situations where there isn't an IO, and it's usually a little less strategic. So when I get to talk about and hear about strategic programs, that's amazing. And I guess tell us a little bit about it. I mean, in your own words, just describe, what the program has accomplished and how the business really views it, because obviously they see it as an asset.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really lucky that our business sees it as an asset. I think that's really such a benefit of working for such a scientific company, is that they value the science in all aspects.
Oh, right.
Too. Yeah. And right. And so, right, because HR gets, a bad rap in the world for just being touchy-feely and just being the people, right?
The police,
the police,
the everything.
Right? Even worse. And actually, strategic HR can bring so much insight into how people operate, right? So I sit within a broader group called Decision Science at J&J.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, Decision Science has people analytics and also our performance management group and myself. And our whole mission is to make people smarter about people. That's what we go out with, right? And so we bring data, and we don't just bring data. We bring data and insights, right, from that data to our decision makers, right? So that decision maker could be one hiring manager hiring a new financial analyst, right? Or that decision maker could be a CFO thinking about his or her pipeline, right? And his or her leadership team. Or that decision maker could be a head of HR thinking about, well, what kind of talent are we going to need to support this business strategy that the business has planned for 2025? Like, what talent are we missing? Right? So those are all the decision makers that can be so benefited by all the data we can bring, and sometimes are aware of what data we can bring, sometimes are not aware of what data we can bring, and sometimes think we have more data than we do, or that we're going to share more data than we will. So it runs the whole gamut, right? Of how do we make sure that we're really strategically employing our efforts and focusing on the right things. I've been spending the past 3 years now really thinking through our skills strategy at J&J and how we better understand the skills of our people. Yes, that's where everybody starts, but I actually need that to be the second step, because the first step is understand the skills needed for all of our jobs, both today and tomorrow. And that's kind of the unsexy step, right? I mean, maybe IOs think it's
a lot of work,
because it's we used to just call it job analysis, but it's like, how do you do that? How do you do that at scale right, at such a diverse company, such a fascinating puzzle to solve, such a fascinating puzzle. And then, right, and then you can really plan. Then you can be like, okay, so these are the skills we think we're going to need. Here are the skills we have. What's the delta? Oh, and by the way, on that second piece of the skills we have, human beings change all the time.
Yeah.
And not that skill level necessarily changes all the time, but
it can,
right? And so how do you keep that up to date is also a fascinating question as well. So
it is.
It's all together.
I know. And you have to start there. I mean, if you don't define, look, the value of any predictive hiring tool, assessment, or whatever it is anchored in the fact that it's job related. If it's not job related, you're missing the point, essentially, right? And if you go to HR tech, boy, all the platforms now, it's all about skills management and, projecting skills forward and filling, future roles. I mean, if there's one, there's 10, at least big platforms that are doing those things with AI or otherwise, and in those, there's got to be some way to, figure out what the skills are. I mean, I think there's a lot of AI focus on that, but there's also a lot of, hey, let's bust out ONET, which is actually the ONET people I learned at the Leading Edge Consortium are actually connecting to GPT. So there'll be, some really cool stuff there. And we'll have our obligatory and fascinating GPT conversation in a minute. I want to get more educated myself and our audience just on, what it's like to have such an awesome purview and influence in an organization that's bought in. And, the light bulb went off for me, the science part of it, right? You're a science-based company. I also found like financial services love assessments because they're numbers people. They're predicting stuff, right? And anybody who does that has a scientific mindset of, oh, we collect data and we make decisions on that data, and good data is great. So do you all build your own assessments at all? Or you use a multitude of vendors? Let's not name any vendors, try to stay neutral here, but tell us a little bit about the blend or the mix of the tools that you all use.
For the most part, we use external vendors, strong scientific psychometric partners in the assessment space. We have created our own assessments in the past. So a few years back, we had created a very, very early on in the selection funnel Credo assessment. So the Johnson & Johnson Credo is foundational to everything we do at Johnson & Johnson. If you're not familiar with it, it's 4 paragraphs that really guide our whole business, right? So it talks about our responsibilities, right? So our first responsibilities is to the doctors and nurses, the mothers and fathers, the patients, everyone who uses our products. The second responsibility, the second paragraph, is to our employees. So I spent a lot of time thinking about that second paragraph of the Credo of our responsibilities to our employees. We also have responsibilities for the communities that we serve, and we have responsibilities back to the shareholders to make a fair profit. So it really helps guide everything we do. And because it's so foundational to every job, we actually did create a Credo assessment we used really early on in the funnel to screen out. What's interesting about that is we were never able to get it globally. We were never able to get it really globally. There were so many country-specific differences that we had to navigate. And then it was still working. It was still working fine to really narrow the hiring funnel early on. But what continues to happen in the assessment world. But then we decided to switch systems that we were using from an applicant tracking perspective, and we couldn't make it work. We couldn't make the assessment work the way we wanted it to work. So this is a real challenge that happens all the time, right? Because this isn't like something you learn in grad school, right? Like I'm all about the psychometrics. I'm all about the good assessment, but then I have some requirements for it, right? Like I don't want you, many people who apply at J&J apply to more than one job over time. Well, I didn't want you taking this test every time. I wanted...
No, not at all.
So then the system requirement was that we knew who you were. And if you applied again within a certain time frame, you didn't have to take it. Your score just went with you.
Smart.
Right? But it couldn't necessarily always do that because sometimes the score was associated with the job wreck,
Job
right,
wreck.
versus the
Yeah, that's how those things
versus the
work.
person.
Yeah.
And like little things like that. So they're like, oh, so Christina, are you okay if they do it again every time? And I was like, no, I'm not okay. No. And so, that whole balance of what you're okay with, what you can live with, what you can't live with, and then how you're prioritizing things, right? Because you got to prioritize the candidate experience, of course. You got to prioritize, of course, the validity of the assessment. You got to prioritize if it's going to be useful. You got to prioritize the cost of everything. So long story short, but all that to say, like, we don't have that assessment anymore. Not because it didn't work as an assessment. It was great as an assessment, because it didn't work practically in our ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, that's an age-old story. So, the overarching values assessment, something I've had a lot of experience with, helping build those and helping advise on those. And, the interesting thing I find is that typically when you get in there and you get the company values, they're not very orthogonal. They're like, oh, there's 15 different things mixed into this description. And when you write an assessment on them, you got to kind of tease it apart, but you can't rewrite those things. So there's challenges there. And I think those are good and meaningful. They certainly don't tell all the story, but if you're just screening on the broad, like, is this person kind of a fit for how we see things? I think that works pretty well. And definitely the tech stuff. I mean, it's the reality. We're working within a technology stack and system, and it doesn't all fit together. I think that's another one of the things you see with ATSs and stuff. They typically don't have their own assessment engine built into them, and so they don't think about it from our point of view. But they're the big kid on the block essentially, so we've got to be subservient. So that's an issue you face, right? And everybody faces that, and it's just about compromises and choosing your battles. But what would you say, because one of the things that I think is important for our listeners, who are both talent acquisition folks and also, psychologists and mostly selection people probably, is existing inside the bigger business, existing inside, HR we talked about, or I guess you transcend talent acquisition. But what's the biggest challenge that you have operating underneath that umbrella in terms of your freedom to make a difference, or the headaches you have? What are you banging your head against the wall about that you would like to change? If you could?
What an interesting question. I have a couple answers.
Go ahead.
All right,
Many
the
as you
first
like.
one is a more external answer of what's happening externally in the field that drives me crazy. I don't know why so many of the vendors that exist today think we don't care about validity. So, of course, psychologists care about validity, but just from a business perspective, I'm not going to spend $1 million on an assessment if it doesn't predict job performance.
Why would you?
Because I can flip a coin for free, right? I can hire a 10th person for free.
A quarter, $1.
That's true.
Like that.
That's true.
Yeah.
I was going to do a quarter because it's easier,
Yeah.
so I can flip a coin for 25 cents.
Yeah. That's
True,
cheap. That's
true
cheap.
story. Right, and I have made the argument on very frustrating days. I've made the argument I can save J&J millions of dollars right now. We'll just hire every 10th person who applies. Done. Over time, I won't have bias, right? Over time, that should vary out, or a random number generator will be better than every 10th, but over time that'll
Sure.
weigh out. So it'll be fair.
What about a chicken? A chicken might do it. They have chickens that pick stalks and stuff.
Oh yeah. With their beak. Yes. Yeah. Right. And so people forget about wait, no. But I need the person to do the job. Oh, you need the person to do the job.
Yeah.
All right. So if you need the person to do the job, then we need to understand what the job is and what the job requires, and then we'll measure things on those. And that, I don't understand how that's getting lost in the conversation when it's the most important thing.
Yeah, I know, because it takes a lot of effort to get there, right? And I think a lot of vendors, they're not really on the hook for that because the company never gets the data to show if it works or not. I mean, that's one of the big things we get called in for is, hey, is this assessment working? As a third party, come in and take a look at it. And so that's an important piece of it.
Yeah, so that's when I bang my head against the wall, and then it gets even more like nuanced. Some vendors then it get really sophisticated, and then they're like, okay, I can prove that it predicts job performance. And I don't know if you've seen this in any vendors you've looked at, but there's some vendor that were showing me that they had a 0.8 correlation
Right.
with
Yeah.
their assessment in job performance, and I was like, 0.8?
Yeah. What kind of corrections?
Really? Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
wow, because they're like, isn't this great? Isn't this great? And so if someone says, look at this 0.8 correlation, isn't this great? That says to me that they either don't understand what they're doing, or they're actually, or they're overfitting their model on purpose.
Yeah, or correcting it with all kind of crazy corrections.
They're correcting on purpose. And so I actually am going to give them the benefit of the doubt and believe that they don't understand, because I'm going to believe the best. But the overfitting of like, okay, and then how, so how did you get to that 0.8 correlation? Because cool, 0.8, I can go home. We can all go home. We have this perfect test now.
Oh man, I mean, we've solved the world's problems, with that.
Yeah, right. And then you're looking at, okay, let me look at how they measure job performance and how they measure the test. And lo and behold, it was the same thing. They just measured the same thing twice.
Right.
They didn't.
Oh yeah, sure. That you would expect a correlation there. Yeah, high.
Yeah. So even sometimes when folks have real, and I want to be careful. I don't want to bash all vendors, and I do want to continue to improve innovation. Everybody, I want companies out there trying new things. Absolutely. Keep trying new things. That's how science works. Keep trying. But science also works that we all critically think about it and think like, hey, is that correct or not? Hey, what's really going on? Hey, what problem is that solving?
So as you talk about job performance, sometimes random thoughts come into my head. So what's the worst job you ever had?
Oh, I've been very lucky. I have not
Your performance was
terrible
good.
jobs.
Yeah.
I have collected my favorite job titles over the years.
Oh, okay. What are those?
So one of the worst jobs that I do think about when I'm trying to motivate myself when I think I'm having a bad day, sewer grout service worker.
Nice. That's a good one. Like, where did you even see that? In the DOT?
Jefferson County, Alabama.
Oh,
So
okay.
in Jefferson County, Alabama, there's a sewer grout service worker job.
Uh-huh.
And it's a county job, so it would have all the benefits and the good things, but that job is you fix the grout in the sewers.
Yeah. You're in there.
You're in
Somebody's
there.
got to do it. Somebody's got to do it,
Wow. Someone
Wow.
applies for that job, there's a list for that job, someone gets that job and hopefully brings home a paycheck to feed their family, and that's great. And
Yeah.
I am so privileged that I don't have to do that job.
Yeah. I think, you probably just are able to switch it off. Just like I think about a surgeon or something, like I don't want to be cut. They just walk in there. It's what they do. They're able to compartmentalize it. And I guess the smell would be tough, but maybe you have a respirator, you got something going on.
Even in my boring jobs that I've had in my life, like I think I've had fun with them. So like in college, one of my jobs was I worked at the Student Employment Center, and basically the major job task that there was when other students who would drop off their time cards for the other jobs they worked, we would make sure their math was right and then initial their math. And so it was a lot of just reviewing time cards and initialing, reviewing time cards and initialing. But I'll tell you, it was just such a break from school. It was such a break from classes. It was such a break. And then it was one of those jobs at the end of it, you had a whole set of time cards that you had done right.
And having that perfect product, that's there's a lot to that,
Yeah.
And having the detachment, yeah, I would say for me, I mean, they got a show, Dirty Jobs. There's all kind of stuff on there. I haven't really watched it a lot, but my own personal one, I was an assistant housekeeper at a Holiday Inn.
Really?
Yeah, and I found my way there. It was, I like working hard and having those kind of jobs coming up. I did a lot of, blue collar jobs just as a teenager and stuff, but I got in a little bit of trouble, let's just say. My dad knew the manager of it was at the downtown in Knoxville where I'm from. It's a big high rise one, a lot of rooms, a lot of stuff going through there. And he's like, I'm going to call my friend, and you know what? You're going to pay for what you just broke by working this job. And I was folding laundry, washing glasses, scrubbing the hallways down, stripping rooms. So I got to see a lot of rooms after people left them, and there's a lot of all kind of stuff in there that you would find. It was a formative job for me, but every time I'm at any kind of lodging establishment, I always have a lot of connection. I don't know exactly what I would say. A lot of sympathy for folks that are doing that, because it's not an easy job. So one thing that I would say is I've seen vendors say, hey, we can predict success with 90% accuracy, 80% accuracy. So I've always told people, that's a giant red flag. That is impossible, to do. I mean, if you get super lucky, like a million monkeys with a million typewriters could write War and Peace or something. But I mean, that's just human nature, and the being human and predicting things humans will do is nigh impossible at any kind of accuracy level like that. The good news is, even at the lower level of accuracy we achieve, we save millions of dollars. We're doing good stuff.
Yes, yes. And I would argue people don't actually want us to be able to do that.
Right.
Meaning, nobody actually wants you and I to be able to predict human behavior with 80 to 90% accuracy. That gets really concerning if
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
Right? So luckily, I'm with you. Like, no, I don't think we can do that. And then there's also a question of one day, if we are able to, should we?
Yeah. Yeah. I
I
mean,
don't know.
yeah, I don't know. It reminds me of a kind of an existential conversation I had last night with my brother-in-law, where we were just talking about, the afterlife and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, you know what? Like, life would suck if we actually knew what came next. I mean, maybe it is nirvana and it's amazing, and there's just fluffy marshmallows floating around and everything you love is there, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I mean, what would that do? People just be committing suicide so they could get there all the time, right? I mean, there's certain things like that we don't want to know or happen, even though we kind of have a quest for it. It's just so interesting, and that ties into, I mean, here is just like a giant red carpet for a segue into the innovation and technology portion of our show, which is a mandatory, perfunctory thing that we have to do. So let's just start the ball rolling there with innovation. What's the innovation you're most proud of that you've seen happen in your world? I'm sure J&J is doing all kind of crazy innovation. That's amazing. But more about what you do. How open is the door to innovation? And, what are some things that you're either proud of or maybe you're considering doing? I don't know. Just talk to us about your job and innovation.
Oh, that's a great question. I'm really proud that we have been able to test things. We have been able, J&J has been open for us trying things out. For example, I'm of the firm belief that I think assessments are going to become more and more passive in the future, right? Instead of having to take a test, we're going to be inferring things. We've tested out some inference assessments
Oh, very cool.
already.
Oh my gosh, cool.
Yeah, we have already tested them out with a pilot group. We are not using them for decision. We're not using the results for decision making. We're still evaluating the results. In most cases, the accuracy is not where I need it to be yet. It's just not there
Yeah.
yet. But we haven't stopped testing,
Yeah.
and we haven't stopped trying, and we're gonna try another one
Good.
soon. And we're gonna keep trying. And I've been really proud that this organization lets us keep trying and is open to us being like, hey, it not working is also a success.
Yeah, of course it is. So failure is nothing but a door to future success. That's the way I look at it. So passive assessment is a passion of mine, and offline we should talk about that because I'm curious. I'm working on, and I'm not trying to sell you at all here, but I'm sitting here looking at what comes next for our field, and can I look at a product that I might be working, and I'm talking to people who are also working on passive assessment type things, and I believe in. I call it stealth assessment. I guess there's all kind.
Oh, I like stealth
Yeah, but
assessment.
there's all kind of stuff around. Like, well, does the person know they're being assessed? Like, we could have another million podcasts on that, but at some point, I'd love to catch up with you. And I think I'm starting the ball rolling with some interviews of folks who do what we do or do what you do, and companies to kind of learn a little bit about what they're doing, et cetera. So we'll connect on that. But
Wait, can I respond to the ethical piece real quick?
yeah,
Because I did get to go to the Institute for Workplace Equality conference last week. The EEOC was talking about this a little bit, and I appreciated the way that they were talking about it, right? So it seems like they're thinking, so they talked a lot about transparency, 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 and they were also taking an ADA perspective of, hold on, how will candidates or employees know to ask for accommodations if they don't know they're being assessed?
yeah,
Is a question
yeah,
that Chair Burrows actually asked, so I can't take credit for that. That was her wording, which was very good wording, and that's exactly right. And I think it's exactly the right question to ask. And I think also from an IO perspective, we have a chance to really lead from an ethical perspective as well as a regulatory perspective. Like, we understand the regulations and we'll make sure we're aligned with all the regulations too. Beyond the regulations, I think there's also this ethical component that I would love to see our field play a bigger hand
I'm trying.
in terms
I'm
of
trying.
yeah, in terms of should we be doing this, and how do we do it the right way to be fair to the person, and not just fair as defined by the uniform guidelines, but feel
Yeah,
fair
yeah,
to the person. And that kind of, so I'm a big fan of passive assessments, and I'm also a huge fan of transparency and making sure you have consent and making sure the data is used appropriately. And I think those issues are challenging too, because there's cultural differences and country differences sometimes on what people think is appropriate to do with your data and not appropriate to do with your data, what you're
definitely.
okay with your employer knowing and what you're not okay. And the line is not always clear. It gets
No,
real slippery. It's a slippery slope real
it
fast.
is. It is.
Again, I'm still excited by all that innovation and think we bring the right lens to that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it's a multidisciplinary conversation. I think about something though, like digital exhaust, right? So you're at some point, it's already happening, but at some point it'll be codified, and hopefully people like us will get a chance to weigh in or be even building it. But just you go out there and look at all the particles you've left in the ether, and then start to make judgments about you. I mean, that do you need an accommodation for that unless you're not creating as much digital exhaust because you don't have the opportunity to use it because so there's a million questions like that, and we'll never be able to answer them all. That's another thing that is so fascinating about what we do is people are all different, and then the circumstances are different, and now it's just the lid's blown off of it. But it's cool to see that. I remember going to the Leading Edge Consortium in like 2019, and you talked there about kind of
Oh
how
yeah.
you're looking at innovative stuff, and innovative stuff is kind of my biggest. I do a lot of stuff that IOs do, but that's my biggest passion area and what I really like the most. So I try to pay attention as much as I can to that. You have some, I guess what I'm saying is there's some precedent, there's some like for that. And in a company your size, with as many applicants and as many employees and as much budget, let's face it, there's no reason you shouldn't be trialing, testing, doing all that. And what do you do with a drug? What do you do with a consumer product? You
Exactly.
trial it.
Exactly.
So
You
on
try it, you
people,
test it.
hopefully it doesn't turn them into mutants. I had a friend, he's a crazy guy, and not even in the professional world at all. He's like a DJ or something. He would participate in drug trials for money. That's how he made a living. He would go to those things, and he told me a couple times like they had to shut him down because and he was like, man, all kind of weird stuff was happening to people. Anyway, it was funny listening to that. When you talk about bad jobs, I don't think I would want that job either at all. And I don't think J&J makes Robitussin. He actually was, he would drink a lot of Robitussin, this guy. And so I don't know how that confounded these medical experiments he was doing, but anyway, I'm sorry that I divergent there, but also I think about that guy and it cracks me up. And of course, they weren't J&J drug trials, I'm sure. So, well, innovation wise, and this is how we opened and originally what we were gonna kind of focus on, but these are not these are fun conversations that can go in any directions, which is how it should be. Let's talk a little bit about, zooming over innovation. And I'm curious, again, I'm not going to be able to get away with doing any content without mentioning, large language models, GPT. So one of the things I'm fascinated about is kind of the spectrum of how companies are looking at using those tools, because they do create all kind of privacy issues and all kind of accuracy issues. But at the same time, and I'm starting a thing where I am not afraid to admit that I use the hell out of those tools.
I love them.
And I'm starting a thing on LinkedIn, every Friday. How many hours did you save this week by using GPT? Let's just admit that we do it because it's making us better, right?
100%.
I mean, I don't just take what it spits out and use it verbatim. It's a good starting point. So, but justifiably, companies, I mean, there's a thing about like Samsung, some kind of sensitive patent stuff leaked out because somebody, so, there's consequences on a lot of levels, but benefits. And that's the paradox of AI in my mind anyway. It's like, it's possibly going to bring the end of the world, but boy, are we efficient. We're making more money and we have more time to be busier with other stuff, right? So there's a duality there and the die's been cast in my mind. Like we've passed the point of no return. This stuff owns us. I'm surrendered to that. I'm not going to not use it because it's awesome. So it's winning. But how are you guys approaching that in whatever way you can actually feel comfortable talking about?
Sure. So we're really trying to embrace large language models, so much so that we do have an internal tool now that is available to all employees for a large language model because the toothpaste is out of the tube. It's not the cat out of the bag.
Yeah.
You can put a cat back in a bag.
Absolutely.
You cannot put the toothpaste back
Yeah.
in. It's done. When I knew it was done was interesting when I was sitting around at the end of last year with other swim parents watching our kids swim, and there were other folks, everyone brought their laptop, right? The working parents.
Right.
They were doing their performance reviews.
Yeah.
They were all using ChatGPT to write the performance reviews.
Yeah.
Right? It saves so much time. Right? You're just a swim practice. You got to get these done. Put it in there, right? And I was like, oh, okay, it's done then. Like this is it. This is what we're doing. I understand companies not wanting to put, and companies should be putting their private information in a public model that is then using that.
Sure.
And so we're really fortunate that we were very quick to create our internal model. I lovingly call her Jenny. I know I'm anthropomorphizing the tool. I understand, but it's called, Gen AI. And
oh yes, I didn't even think of that.
So I call her Jenny.
That's great.
There is a training that we have, but it's available. It's available, about how to write prompts and how to use it and how not to use it and what to put in and what not to put in, but it's a secure place for people to go. We also have spun up very quickly a generative AI community of practice board, where if you want to do a larger Gen AI project within J&J, you submit that idea to this body, and then folks can ask questions. So it has folks like legal on it. It has risk folks. It has technology folks. It has me. It has other folks, right? Looking at those ideas submitted and determining like, hey, is this a risk or is this not a risk? Is this something we want to pursue? Is this not something we want to pursue? There's going to need to be more and more structured governance like that, but at least that's a start.
Yeah, there has to be.
And my plug for all your listeners is HR needs to be a part of that. And sometimes the tech folks don't see why. They're like, well, why? But even there's so many examples of why in terms of when I think of projects that have come through. If you're putting together a project with a large language model that then substantially changes the job that the person's doing, we need to know that from an HR perspective. Is that a different job now?
Yeah.
Is it a different job?
Well, yeah.
Or have you created new job? Like, what does that mean? What are the consequences of that? Sure. Other questions in terms of like, okay, well, what data are you putting in there? right? Like, what are you putting in data on people? There's a lot of talk and thinking about using large language models for coaching. And I want to be careful about like different kinds of coaching. Like there's different, like, how should I phrase this questions you can ask versus broader coaching. I think that our learning and coaching professionals should have a really clear point of view on that, because I don't know if you want a predictive text tool actually being your coach, or maybe it is helpful if you need just some help immediately about how to phrase something, maybe that is a fine use of it. I'm not sure. I get really nervous about large language models for job descriptions, particularly when it gets to the minimum qualifications part of the job description, and the model suggests that you need a bachelor's degree for the job. Really? Based on what? Model? Based on, oh, that's the next logical word. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay. I don't think
exactly.
that counts
Yeah.
as validation. So
No.
But I'm really excited that we're trying it. We're trying to spin up. We have that governance in place. We have the internal tools, and we also have our different data science organizations across the broader enterprise. They are able to use large language models in their own instance as well. So, for example, in our people analytics team, they are using large language models on very confidential engagement survey data to look at our qualitative comments. We're actually very good at J&J at answering our engagement survey every year and getting a lot of qualitative comments, and we've been able to organize, categorize, summarize those qualitative comments in a way that's been phenomenal this year. And also, Charles, from an assessment perspective, if it gets that good at categorizing qualitative information, can we move away from quantitative Likert rating scales?
Oh my gosh. Boom. I didn't even thought of that too. But yes, we're going to be moving away from a lot of the tools that we've been using to accomplish the same end results. I'll
Yeah.
tell you, I just wrote a little GPT. I haven't really tested it much yet because now you can just write your own little GPTs and string them together, because we do a lot of qualitative interviews too. And I typically go through those things and code them and then put them into some kind of thing and crunch the numbers. And I'm like, wait a minute, can I just feed this and get the themes out of this thing? And so I built one and I'm going to give it a try. And I tried to do it manually with some of my team a while back, and we just hit the wall. I don't have any serious AI type people on the team. And I didn't want to go pay for all that stuff. So at any rate, we did it the old fashioned way. But you're right. And the idea of Likert scales going away, wow, that's cool. I think that we are going to see a lot of stuff going away. I was just in an interesting LinkedIn discussion about cheating using GPT. And I had the idea that, you know, what happens when we use GPT to write our assessments and candidates are using GPT to answer the assessments? Then GPT is assessing GPT and the people are
Oh,
nowhere
a
in there.
hundred
I
percent.
mean, that's the most insane thing.
100%. Have you seen the tools to help you with the interview? Where GPT will like listen to the interview questions and
Yeah,
just give
yeah.
you the answer and you can just read it?
Yeah.
Absolutely. 100%. Also, I do think very soon it's going to be GPT emailing another GPT, emailing another GPT, because I'm
Oh, yeah.
I'm lucky enough to
Absolutely.
I'm testing Microsoft Copilot right now, which helps you, which it has a large language model, right? To
Well,
draft your
explain it to
email.
our listeners. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's
It helps you do.
Microsoft's large language model, GPT to
Yeah.
embedded within the Office suite. So Word,
Yeah.
PowerPoint, Excel,
Mm-hmm.
and Outlook. And so it can help you draft your emails. You just say what you want to say, and then you say,
Right.
like, and make this 4 paragraphs and make it sound really professional, and
Right.
go. And it's
Exactly.
and it is a time saver. It is from not starting with a blank
Yeah.
sheet of paper. I have found that it hasn't quite got my tone. I haven't found it ever to be funny. I don't know if you've tried to make it funny, but I'm like,
Oh, absolutely. I've made it funny. I
you
interviewed
made
it
it
for my
funny?
podcast.
You got to teach me your
It told
secrets.
jokes. It told corny jokes. I just said, I interviewed it for my podcast and I typed in the prompt. I said, respond in a witty and engaging way as a guest. And it would do that. And then
Oh,
I said, tell me a joke. And it told me a joke. And then I said, how did you choose that joke? And it said the probability that you would laugh at that joke was high. So I put that joke in there, and absolutely. And I poked it, made fun of it a little, and it accepted that, and it never made fun of me back. I don't know if it's programmed to do that, but if you have an hour or whatever, listen to that episode. It was my favorite one besides this one, at
I
least, that I did.
will. I
It's super
will.
entertaining. It's super entertaining. So yeah, it can do that stuff.
I mean, I think soon that's going to be drafting emails to go to someone else who's going to ask GPT to summarize that email and draft a response
Yeah.
back, and it'll be back and forth. And then when will we? I do worry about then when will we meet each other, right? Like, so if that's how
Yeah.
we
I
communicate,
know.
would it just be face-to-face conversations or phone calls where two
I mean, we're
humans
gonna
will
be
really interact?
we're gonna be living in our own metaverse. That's the only way. Like, that's the way I say it too. Our lives will be the metaverse, because we'll have all these agents doing stuff, and the deep fake possibility. GPT-5, which they're working on, and with the recent whatever's happening at OpenAI, this will continue. No matter who's doing it, GPT-5 is going to be able to do video. So then you're thinking about, like, you know, how I think there'll be something with, you got to put digital stamps on it and stuff, but people will figure out how to circumvent that. So
Yeah.
we're lucky that right now we're having fun thinking about this stuff. It's going to get absolutely crazy, absolutely weird. We won't have any control over that. So we're going to have to just surf that wave. And all the things we talked about today, assessment, the core idea of predicting how well someone will do on a job, or giving someone feedback to make them better on their job, the core ideas and universal truths of dealing with people on the job, those are not going to change. The way we do it is going to become like it, Likert scale is going to look like a typewriter at some point,
Yeah.
and that's what's going to happen. Good for that, as long as we know the stuff works. So there's that piece of it. And I think there's a lot of hesitancy. The big companies I work with, while they may be doing innovative stuff, maybe not as much as you all, they don't want to try. There's a lot of fear in just putting these things, justifiably so, right? So at what point are we going to have confidence in this stuff?
Right.
That's the thing. When are we going to have the confidence to let go, to fully let
To
go?
fully let go. I don't know when we'll have the
Yeah.
confidence, but I agree there's a lot of fear. I wish there was less fear and more just critical thinking and critical evaluation. Because you're right, it's not working right. We all know that it hallucinates. We all know that it's not perfect yet, right? And so we're trying to understand more, but again, it should just be science. The way innovation works, we will try
Yeah.
it, we will critically evaluate, we will test and try again, and we will repeat and we'll repeat.
Yeah, exactly.
I am happy to see so many people trying to educate themselves so quickly on this to get past the fear,
Yeah.
to get to the critical evaluation step. But you're right, like there's definite harm that can come from these tools, 100%. And we should be aware of them, and we should guard against them, and and that and we should continue to innovate
Yeah.
too.
A Likert scale never hurt anybody. It didn't. I don't think so. But I totally agree with that. And I think that we have to get past that. I think if you ask GPT those questions, it's a little biased on itself. Like, in other words, it's going to tell you not to fear anything and how you can trust it. I asked it on my thing, why it hallucinates, and it gave me, and I asked it, do you take LSD? And that's why you hallucinate. It said, no, I'm purely a digital model. I can't take any substances. So that was pretty hilarious, right? But
Just say no, I guess.
yeah, just say no. But it won't say no.
Yes, it won't
It's
say no.
designed to please. And it said, well, there are things where there's low probabilities and I don't know. And if I kept telling you that I don't know, would you keep using me? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
So there you have it. So, wow. So we're running out of time. What a great conversation. I feel like I could keep doing this for days. Just tell everybody, I say this every time and everybody says, yeah, follow me on LinkedIn. So, I mean, I'll say, how do people keep track of you and all that kind of stuff? And you'll say probably what I just said, but go ahead.
Well, in addition to following me on LinkedIn, you know what I'm going to say? Find me at SIOP. Find me
There
at
you go.
conferences. I'm so excited conferences are back. I
Yeah, I know.
I really
I know.
appreciate in-person conversation with people. I mean, knock on wood, I will be at PsyOp this coming year.
Yeah, me
Find me
too.
there. I'd love to talk to you.
Cool.
I was at LEC. I try to
Yeah, that
go
was
to
fun. We had
things.
some fun.
We
Yeah,
have such a phenomenal profession, right?
I
There are just
know.
amazing, amazing people who are doing amazing work and thinking through really hard problems in the world. And it's fascinating. And so
It is.
come say hi at PsyOp.
Yes. I'll send my agent to talk to your agent, and they'll let us know what the results of the conversation were.
Yes.
You know,
If they could just summarize it
that,
for me in 3 bullets.
yeah, well, sometimes at PSYOP, as much as I love it, that's what I want. I like those lightning rounds where you get the point
Yes,
right away.
yes.
And, anyway, well, we got to close out. It's closing out on an hour. So thank you so much for a great conversation. I've got notes I took of things I never thought of, which is my real secret goal of all this, is that. So great job today. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. This was such a fun conversation, Charles, and I'll talk to you anytime.
Yeah, good deal. As we wind down today's episode, dear listeners, I want to remind you to check out our website, rockethire.com, and learn more about our latest line of business, which is auditing and advising on AI-based hiring tools and talent assessment tools. Take a look at the site. There's a really awesome FAQs document around New York City Local Law 144 that should answer all your questions about that complex and untested piece of legislation. And guess what? There's going to be more to come, so check us out. We're here to help.